Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Rock and Roll, the enrollment marketing podcast created by VisionPoint Marketing. My name is Christian Jessup. I'm the company marketing manager here at VisionPoint, and today is our third episode in our series on the adult learner research study that VisionPoint recently conducted. Today, I'm excited to be joined by a very special guest, Danielle Attanasio, our CRM strategist here at VisionPoint. Hey, Danielle, how are you doing?
I'm good, Christian. Hi, it's nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So, this is our third episode on our adult learner research study, and today we're wanting to talk all about how we nurture adult learners from that interest point to enrollment. So, we've talked some about adult learner demographics, what they're interested in. We've talked some about their media consumption habits, kind of like what channels are they on, how do we get them to convert from those channels. But today we want to really focus on, okay, you've got the lead information. Now, what do you do? A lot of our research study kind of focused on what communication channels adult learners are interested in, when and where to contact them, sorts of things like that. So let's dive right into it. So I want to start with probably an unsurprising finding from our study, but an important one to start with nonetheless, which is that email is still the most preferred communication method for these adult learner audiences. We found that 60% of all adult learners prefer email communication from universities. So that's prospective adult learners, prospective graduate student learners, any type of adult learner wants to hear those from those email comms. So Danielle, talk to me a little bit about like why do you think that's still the primary channel that comes out on top?
Yeah, I think I can relate to this personally. I feel like email is it's reliable, first of all. I feel like we're all comfortable with it. And when we talk about communicating with, for example, like our traditional undergraduate or our first year students or incoming freshmen, that population is always changing. I mean, generationally, they're always the same age relatively, and that is changing with how technology evolves, how people are interacting with advertisements, how people are interacting with colleges. But our adult learner population, I feel like we see a little bit more stability in those methods. Of course, times are changing for everybody and this time is evolving for everybody, but it does seem to me still that email and text messaging even are both still really top of mind for these students. We talk a lot about like flexibility and meeting adult learners where they're at and those types of themes in our messaging. And I feel like email and text also both respond well to that. They kind of put you in control. You receive an email and you don't have to respond right away. You can kind of save it for later and read it at your own time. Same with the text message. I know, at least for me, where I would probably fit into this adult learner population now, which is always a fun thing to think about. But I can't stand when my phone rings, and I never answer it if I don't know the phone number. So I feel like that kind of mentality does hold true, and it just lets people be more in control of their schedule and when they consume the information that you're trying to send them.
Yeah, absolutely. And you raised a lot of good points that we'll get to throughout this podcast episode. And yeah, I'm right there with you. It's weird because when I started at Vision Point, I was 22 years old, fresh out of college. So I felt like I related better to that like incoming prospective college student class.
Yep.
Now here I am about to turn 30 and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm relating more to the adult learners now. So it's weird for me to come to terms with reading this, but I totally agree with you. Just personally, I definitely prefer to see those emails, those texts come through. So I wasn't surprised to see audiences within our sort of demographic range respond and resonate with that as well. So let's talk a little bit. We've heard randomly the phrase where people say email is dead, and we're seeing through the data, through personal anecdotes, that's just not proving to be true. But I think the place people come from with that is we're sending emails and people aren't opening them, which is a fair complaint. So talk to me a little bit about what makes people think that about email and how do we kind of look at our data and say that's not true, but here's why. So what makes a good email that people are going to open, that people are going to respond to, as opposed to a quote unquote dead email that people just see and instantly delete?
Yeah, that is such a loaded question. But I don't know. I struggle with that email is dead mentality because I think it always came from the place of it's actually the opposite. So it's actually that we're all sending and receiving more emails than ever before, and that number is just going up. So it's not that email is dead, it's just harder to break through and actually be opened and paid attention to. So when you think about trying to get into somebody's inbox, again, I kind of put it back on myself and I picture my inbox. So I have multiple email addresses, right? And one of my email addresses is really kind of the home base for anything I subscribe to and any form I fill out. And it's just gets 20 emails an hour and I log in at the end of the day and I'm like, all of these subject lines look the same. I actually saw a subject line this morning and it was something to the effect of, your journey begins here, which is something we see a lot in higher ed emails. It was an athletic clothing brand marketing email. So it's not like we're just competing with other institutions and in the higher ed space. I mean, our inboxes are overloaded. So when we think about how we're going to get people to open those emails, really the only things we can control to get them to open the email are the things they can see right away. So it's going to be the sender. Who are we sending these emails from? A lot of people, there was a push a while back to say, you know what, you should be sending emails from a person. Like you should be
Mhm.
sending this from Danielle, not from institution name because it's more personal. But kind of the pushback on that is, well, if I have no idea who Danielle is, I don't really want to receive an email from her and I'm not going to open it. Similarly to, I'm not going to answer my phone if I don't recognize the phone number. So really it's about reliability. And if your institution is going to be more recognizable by the institution name, especially to like a prospect who hasn't really engaged with you a ton, then probably go with that instead. Similarly, your subject lines are huge, keeping them short, keeping them not manipulative. I feel like there's a trend to be like, how can I trick somebody into
Mm,
thinking this email is important enough to open? But instead, how can we write an email that is actually important enough to open? And then the subject line will write itself if you're being clear and you're actually writing a subject line to describe what the message is that you're sending. And then finally, there's kind of the pre-header text is it's either the pre-header text or like the first sentence of your email, basically, that populates
mhm.
there. So that's where you get a little bit more information, but the other kind of side to that is most people are opening their emails on a mobile device. So if you open your email app on the mobile device, sometimes you'll see that you actually have less text in that area showing. So kind of have to think about it from that perspective as well. It's difficult to
Yeah.
make an impact in the inbox.
No, for sure. And that's a great point to be thinking about those elements in particular, because I know when I am deleting an email, most of the time, I'm deleting an email based on the sender, the subject line, and like you said, either
I
that
don't
like
even open it.
exactly. I don't even open it. So like I think there's the mentality sometimes of like, oh, if we have good content inside, then like we're gonna grab people's attention. But if you aren't grabbing their attention based on who's sending it and that immediate subject line, then it's not gonna matter how great your content is inside.
Right.
But the good thing is when you have that relevant information that grabs people and that isn't manipulative, people remember it. We did ask adult learners too where they recalled seeing information about higher ed in the last 30 days before they were completing the survey. And the number one response was via email. 33% of respondents said that they remember seeing information in their email inbox from higher ed institutions. So the good side of that is, email isn't dead. It's the thing that they're remembering seeing the most, but it has to be a solid, compelling email in order to actually get to that point. So let's talk a little bit about text messaging as well. That was the, second most respondent. I think it was 52% of adult learners said they preferred text communications from university. That is something that we're seeing more of and more frequently, but texting can be a very different avenue from email. So talk to me a little bit about how do texts and emails differ in terms of tone, in terms of content you want to send, because they are very different platforms, even if looking at both our phone usually.
Yeah, I'd say one main difference obviously is the length.
Hmm.
We're well past the days of that character limit on a text message being like crucially important because you're not, counting against SMS credits and turning over into a new message as much as we once were. But you still kind of want to aim for that sort of 150 to 160 character limit so you're not sending them a paragraph text that's scary and strange. I'd say the tone is a little bit more to the point, kind of straightforward. Why am I texting you? Um, Getting kind of straight to what you're trying to share. Usually you want to have some sort of link to a call to action, whether it's to apply, whether it's to give you some more information or to reply and ask some questions. One big major difference is the legality of text messaging. There's actually a lot of like legal considerations to consider in terms of you can't just start blasting everybody that you have heard of with text messages. It's best practice to ask first. So usually we're seeing text messaging in at least the inquiry stage and on. And then as we get kind of deeper in the funnel and as we build that relationship with the student, we can kind of increase that texting more. But you definitely want to ask permission first, which can do two things. It makes your pool that you're sending text messages to smaller, but you have a pool of people who have double opted in basically to get information from you. So you can do it a little bit more frequently because they have given you the permission to do that. I think the thing with text messaging too is we have typically trended towards keeping that more transactional, right? So it's reminders, it's push notification style messaging, it's apply now, it's a deadline is approaching, it's can I help you? Do you have any questions? I think there's room to be a little more playful and fun there, but you kind of have to build the relationship first. And especially when we're talking about adult learners, they're on the go, they're doing their own thing, they're busy. For me, I can't handle like unread messages, so I think a text message lends itself to wanting to be read more. So what we want to think about a little bit more is maybe the time of day that we're sending the text message. So potentially how often we're texting, the time of day we're sending that message, what the message says. So we always try to sneak in like a hi Danielle, it's blank. So you're actually kind of announcing yourself because
Hmm.
typically from our CRMs, we're getting these sort of vague phone numbers from my zip code or from my area code. So kind of trying to get people to store that number so it comes and it's recognizable when they receive the messaging. But I'd say those are the big differences, I guess, between email and text, technically speaking.
No, that's really helpful. And I do agree. We sometimes view text as transactional, and there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that, but I do think there's the opportunity for more conversation and personal interactions there. It's almost a good bridge between the formality of email and the phone calls, which we've seen that these adult learners do not want to receive. So I think text messaging could maybe be a bridge in between those two methods if used correctly. And like you said, timing is super important. We saw in this study that that even varies by sub-audiences. We saw that prospective graduate students, for example, are very online on their devices in the early morning, whereas a lot of times the more traditional adult learners were on their devices in the evenings and late nights. So just kind of keeping that in mind, like you said, about like when do we send this text? Just kind of looking at your audience, seeing what the engagement is, when the engagement is, that can be really important. So speaking of phone calls, like I said, phone calls were not a preferred method of outreach. Depending on the audience, we saw that only between 25 and 30% of adult learners preferred phone calls from universities. But what's interesting with that is a lot of institutions we've seen, we've spoken with, still lead with outbound calls. That's very much their preferred outreach method, even though the adult learners are not showing that to be their preferred method. Just it's funny, someone at VisionPoint was telling me they recently filled out an RFI form, and within 2 days they'd received 6 phone calls from an institution. And I personally, I can think of nothing that would stress me out more than getting that many phone calls in 48 hours. So kind of tell us about that dichotomy. Why are schools still calling when our audience is saying they don't really want that? And what's the right and wrong way to do a phone call, both in terms of when you should place it and what you should be doing with those calls?
Yeah, I think part of it is just in lead nurturing in general, we're often leading with our preferences as the people who are working in the office and as the admissions counselors, or you're leading with when you have free time or during the workday. So my admissions counselors are here 8 to 4, so that's when they're going to be doing some phone calls. And I think it's also kind of a traditional idea that you're leading with this phone call. So you get an inquiry and you call them to follow up. And that's just kind of been something that's been considered the standard for a long time, and a lot of people still do that. And it's not to say that phone calls are bad. I just
Hmm.
think more and more, and especially with this audience, you have to sort of earn it, like earn the right to call. And you can do that maybe by collecting some sort of preferred method of contact. So this all to me just comes out and says, I mean, you're not saying 100% on any of these questions. So everyone is going to have their own personal preference. So you can ask, is it okay if we call you? You can set it up like an appointment. You can wait until you kind of build that relationship with them so that they're expecting the call, or that they maybe will know more about what you have to tell them. The only thing worse than a phone call is an unexpected phone call. Like, I don't know what you're going to want to talk to me about, so I'm scared to answer. I hardly even want to order my own like takeout on the phone. So, just building that trust first and allowing them to opt in, sort of like text messaging, I think is huge. Otherwise, you want to be really careful. Six phone calls in a short amount of time like that is really risky. I mean, you're begging to be blocked. And I think part of the only reason that that phone number didn't get blocked was because it was it was kind of one of our secret shopping initiative
Right.
types of things. So we wanted to see how it played out. But if I were just kind of a regular person who was filling out some information and I actually got 6 calls in under 24 hours, there's no way that that number was not being blocked. So
No.
we want to be careful because it's really hard to unopt somebody out, and we don't want to push them too far.
100%. And yeah, I love that about building trust. And that kind of goes with like the interplay between communication channels here too. If you're texting, then that can be a thing of like, I'd love to call you like tomorrow and like talk more about this opportunity, or that could be part of the email opt-in. Like you said, it's really just about that relationship, that unexpected call. Some people like, but a lot of people don't, as we're seeing in the data. So maybe having that be later in your outreach flow, or at least if that first call doesn't work, not giving up on it, but giving it a little breathing room while you establish that relationship.
Yeah, and if you have kind of a standard phone number, I know a lot of the CRMs now build in text messaging and phone calls from the same sort of system, so you can do them from the same phone number. And you can start to build that trust early on in the lead nurturing across email, across text, even as sort of like a next step of save this number to your phone. Like if you ever need us, we're here. And if we ever need you, we'll call. So when you call, it's saved in their phone, hopefully, that they actually listened. But for the small amount of people who actually do it, now it's, oh, it's this school that's calling me. It's not just a random number with my area code that I don't know.
I love that. And I mean, this just all goes back to, again, this isn't transactional, this is a relationship. And the more we
Yeah,
can do to make it a relationship, the more likely these students are to continue in the pursuit of education.
definitely.
Um, so let's talk about a finding that surprised me a little bit in the data. This is specific to prospective graduate learners, but whenever we were asking, like, how do you want to receive more information once you have kind of filled out that RFI, almost 40% of graduate learners said that they were open to social media outreach. So DMing them on social media, sending them reminders and messages on social media. And that was just a little unexpected to me. It feels so informal from what we're used to, at least. But as we've seen with the rise of like text messaging, that informal conversation has become more popular. So, talk to me a little bit about that. How do we even account for that type of segmenting and messaging within CRMs? That just seems to open a whole can of worms. So, what would be a way we could even go about this sort of thing?
Yeah, I read this and I was surprised too. I was like, that's a little odd to me. But then I thought about it and I was like, well, I mean, I guess you message businesses on Facebook, and that's sort of becoming, especially talking about this kind of adult learner graduate audience, it's becoming an older, so I guess it's
Yeah.
social media channel, Facebook, Instagram, those kind of DM style of messaging, it it becomes less surprising the more you think about it. And it is also just a testament to when we talk about audience segmentation, we're talking about personalizing communication based on who you're sending the communication to, but we don't often spend a lot of time talking about how you're sending the communication based on that audience segment. Now, in terms of really reaching out to people via social media, there's definitely going to be a little bit of a technical gap there because, to my knowledge, there aren't a ton of CRMs who integrate in that way with like being able to just send out Facebook DMs and like have them be part of your automated channel. But you can incorporate it into what you're sending. So you can do more social media groups, or you can do more maybe like social media kind of like hashtag type things, or if you have sort of an Instagram channel that's based, listen to me, I just sounded so old. Did I just say Instagram channel? What they're
You
called?
have a little Instagram channel here.
Instagram
No, you're
handle
good.
account. If you have sort of an Instagram account that's dedicated to like the admissions office, that might be a place where you can do some more one-on-one outreach, but it becomes a lot harder to manage, which I imagine is why it doesn't end up in a lot of people's lead nurturing strategy traditionally. Um, you can do it in terms of, though, media kind of retargeting. And if you have people who you know have opted into communication like that, retargeting them through kind of social media advertisements and things like that could feel like, I said I was open to social media and I kind of like that and I'm getting the right information into my feed. That can feel appropriate. So that is one way to do it. And kind of just generating excitement, I think, is the other kind of common way we've seen use social media. Like join, like meet other people on this group or follow this Instagram page and you can win prizes and post photos and comment on things and get your questions answered.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, definitely a surprising finding at face value. But you're right. The more you kind of dig into it and think about it, it kind of makes sense. Like just how we interact with a lot of, especially businesses now. And so if you're treating this like a business, it makes sense that like sometimes that's how people would prefer to communicate and
Right.
ask their questions.
And I think generationally too, like our younger generations, social media is almost like more personal.
Mhm.
It's less personal in that it's bigger and the network is bigger and we're following a lot of, like influencer culture and all those things. But in some ways it's more personal because it's like actually almost like a location that people are spending time at. But for our adult learners and our graduate learners who it was a little bit more passive, it can still feel sort of like that email channel. Like, I mean, I'll get to my Facebook notification when I get to it. It's not really like a groundbreaking thing, but it's a way for me to communicate with you one-on-one without giving you my phone number. It's like arm's distance, but still personal.
Yeah. And you talked a little bit within that about the importance of like segmentation. And throughout all this too, we've talked about personalization. So can you talk a little bit too about how people should be segmenting this audience, personalizing both in terms of their CRM and just their overarching communication plans?
I love personalization. This is a rabbit hole I could catch myself down for a long time, but the thing about the adult learner population is that it is a massively diverse group of people. It's a really wide range of ages. It is a really wide range of demographic information. They're coming from all over. Your adult learners are basically anyone who's not your traditional 18 to 20-year-old transfer student, first year student, anybody else. It could be anyone in the world. So it's a really broad group of people to message to. And then if you start thinking about people who might qualify in those populations, so like maybe our military affiliated population or our kind of like first generation, potentially like working adults or our career changes who are trying to come back for like some certificate programs to get an advance in their career. All very different people, all could use very different personalization. So I think that last thing I was talking about, kind of prompting them and trying to get some more information about their purpose, like what they're looking for, Are they looking to go back to school? Are they looking for an advanced degree? Are they looking to change careers? Are they looking to get a promotion or advance their career? Kind of understanding their motive is a really interesting way to segment and kind of personalize to this population. Similarly, we can look at behavior instead of facts about them. So this kind of works for any audience, but if you start to look at their behavior instead of who they are as an individual necessarily, you can start to meet them where they're at. So you can look at if you have a CRM like Slate, you can see where they're spending time on your website. And if they spend a certain amount of time on the financial aid page, we can ping them about a financial aid message or have someone reach out to them. Or if they are, a certain amount of time has gone by and they haven't interacted with you in a while, you can use that to your advantage and kind of personalize your messaging based on their engagement level. So you can kind of look at what they're doing or what they're not doing instead of who they are because it is such a broad population. So until you get deeper in the funnel, it's sometimes hard to exactly know that much about them.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and it really is such an important component of this. And shameless plug, but this is part of the podcast, is we really would love for everyone to download our adult learner study. And a lot of the study dives into those different demographics, those preferences, because you're right, you are going to have very different communication plans for a military audience or for a working mom or for a senior adult. So taking all of that into consideration as well as their interactions and behaviors with you can really be influential, and you can read a lot about their thoughts about different institution types, about higher education as a whole in our adult learner study. So just a few more questions for you, Danielle. A lot of times at VisionPoint, we call the form fill like the hand raise. You know, adult learners are raising their hand when they fill out the form saying, hey, contact me. But even though they do that, then they never convert. We never hear from them again. They never open emails, answer calls. They never enroll in the institution. So, based on your experience, what's kind of the missing piece sometimes in how schools follow up that lead to that lack of conversion after the quote unquote hand raise?
Yeah, I think there's two that come to mind, and the two main themes I think we've seen the most are clarity of messaging and kind of what they're supposed to do now, and timing. So if you think about clarity, a lot of times the thing that they're raising their hand for is that they're requesting more information. And then the timing perspective is, best case scenario, you're getting an automated thank you for your submission, thank you for your interest, we'll be with you in a second. And then they wait a time limit. They don't really know what it's going to be. They might have forgotten, they might move on. And we sometimes will immediately reach out to them and be like, okay, like, what do you want to know? Or tell me about you. And the thing that they answered was they want more information about us, but we're immediately turning it around and trying to get more information about them. So it's, I think sometimes just like a disconnect of what exactly they're looking for, what we're sending them back, and kind of the timing and frequency that we do it in. So, I mean, I think best practices would tell us we do want that really fast, focused response. We definitely want to confirm that we've gotten what they're sending us, but giving them back some really clear information because that's what they asked for in the form of maybe like a brochure or an introduction email, or that's maybe when you offer some sort of connection with a person in the office to really get more information. But keeping our messaging to really singular calls to action, making it really clear what they're getting into, and acknowledging that just because they filled out a form, we have no idea where they are in the process. They could be filling out this form because maybe they want to take a class in 2 summers and from now, we don't know. Or it could be actually, I want to take a class maybe that starts in a month and I need to go really, really quick. So I think those two things are probably the biggest gaps in terms of not converting those people who have opted in and thinking like, oh, just because they filled out a form, that means I've got them. Like they're interested and that's all we need to know.
No, that's a great point. And you're right, there is that disconnect sometimes because they filled out the form. Of course, we as an institution want to know as much as we can about them because of that, but that's not always necessarily the reason they filled out the form. So, yeah, absolutely making sure they get the information they need. And then if it's a good match, then will inevitably get information back from them as well. I wonder too if that might have something to do with the emerging channel preferences we're seeing. Like, do you think maybe adult learners want to receive the emails as opposed to a phone call because the email does just give them a chance to just find out more?
Yeah, potentially. And sometimes it's almost like a barrier sometimes because I've experienced this numerous times where I've gone to a website and I see like, oh, they have a digital brochure, I'm going to download it. But to download it, you have to fill out a form and you have to
Mm.
get through this kind of like wall block to actually get the information. So they could very well be in these early stages of shopping around and we don't really know how engaged they are by that first form fill. We have to kind of work with them a little bit and figure out where they're actually at in their journey.
We've talked a lot about this already, but what's one part of the communication journey that you think higher ed institutions right now are really undervaluing when it comes to the adult learner population?
Actually, I think what we were just talking about is probably that middle.
Yeah.
Um, there was a time when I probably would have said the bottom of the funnel, that yield, anti-melt kind of a stage. But I think the middle is really becoming the most like underserved stage. We put a lot of emphasis on getting people to fill out a form or convert to an inquiry or click on an ad or filling that kind of top of the funnel, getting that form fill. We put a lot of emphasis on our admitted students and getting them to yield and actually enroll after they've been admitted. But that middle and kind of getting people to convert who might be on the fence is definitely undervalued. So I think checking in frequently is pretty important, being really clear in what we're sending out, thinking about timing. So we talked a little bit about how when they fill out those forms, we're not totally clear on what their timeline is. So they could be looking for something a year and a half from now, or they could be looking for something in a month. But kind of asking questions like that is really important. We were just putting together something about just like building better forms in general. And we were talking about asking the information that you need, but asking the information that you're actually going to use. So sometimes we say to put these questions on forms like what questions do you have or what things are you interested in hearing about or what area of interest are you interested in most program of interest are you interested in most and then we never use it. So why did we ask them? So just being really careful, I guess, about how we're reaching out, doing all the things we've talked about already, using a lot of channels, meeting them with those emails and those text messages, being really clear so we're not sending these kind of wishy-washy messages that don't have a call to action and they don't really serve a purpose. But being there to kind of reassure them as well and knowing that they might get lost in the middle. So they've raised their hand, but why haven't they filled out the application?
Yeah, absolutely. That really does seem like such an important component. They can just get lost in that middle ground between like the marketing and admissions
Yeah.
realm. And so, yeah, definitely establishing that middle funnel area can be really key. So that's really helpful. So, last question. This might be a good like pop quiz for how well you've looked at the study, the research
Oh
study so
no.
far. But what would you say out of the adult learner research study, was there a single finding that either surprised you the most or most like affirmed your previous knowledge and thoughts about this population and about what people are looking for? And if you don't have an answer, that's fine too. But
The two things that come to me immediately are the email. So I thought I was excited to hear that email was still top of mind. I didn't feel very surprised by that fact, but it was like validating to see that. I think the thing that surprised me the most until again I sort of reflected on it was the YouTube. I think it was a whole thing about YouTube being really undervalued
yes.
and a lot of that came to the top of a lot of channel preferences, which I thought was so interesting. But then I remembered that I'm the generation of people who tried to all become YouTubers in 2008. So it kind of makes sense that we're still all using YouTube as like a search engine and that type of thing. Um, but that I think is the thing that came to mind for what was the most surprising. And I started to try to think about how that could be incorporated into some of this lead nurturing work. So a lot of schools will have kind of testimonial videos or tours or things on YouTube, and those can definitely be incorporated into communication. And kind of we're always trying to say, like, let's use more video, let's try to get more information across with less words. So we can kind of get that involved, I think, in a way that would be really interesting.
Yeah, no, YouTube has continually been the most surprising part of the study for me. But like you said, it makes sense because our generation lives on YouTube, whether it's asking, like, how do I fix my sink that's broken, or tell me more about this higher ed institution. Everything that we're doing a lot of times is on YouTube. But
Yeah.
yeah, I love the idea of thinking about how can we work this in more with the middle and bottom of the funnel, because a lot of times we do view YouTube as such a top of funnel tactic. Like, sure, we'll run a few ads on there. Hopefully, someone finds us on YouTube. But no, it's like, how can we include that for the visual learners that don't want to read a 20 paragraph email from us, to give them an easy look at the admissions process, or like you said, a campus tour.
Yeah.
There are so many great uses of YouTube for just providing information to people that I think we forget about a lot of times when we're thinking about these communications plans.
Yeah, and a lot of times we won't actually physically embed videos in emails.
Yes.
It's not best practice. It messes with a lot of stuff. And sometimes you just can't do it, but we'll kind of fake embed a YouTube video. So it's sort of just a screen grab that when they click on it, it brings them to a YouTube video. But now they're in this kind of separate location. So if you have a YouTube channel that is well organized and appealing and they can kind of navigate around, and you're linking them to a video that's in a playlist that's kind of going to autoplay once it's finished, you sort of capture them in a new way once they get there. So there's definitely some interesting ideas there regarding YouTube. But
Yeah,
what
it's
about you?
like you read our blog already, because we released a blog this week talking about tips for organizing your YouTube,
Oh,
making sure
yeah.
that your YouTube.
I
Yeah,
actually don't
see,
think I knew
it's perfect.
that.
It's all connected, but it proves that this really is just best practice for making sure that they don't just get lost, that they're sent to a good source of information that's well organized. But yeah, that's incredibly helpful. Danielle, thank you so much for joining us and talking through all of this. It's always a pleasure to get to talk to you. And as always, if any of our listeners want to reach out, if they want to meet with Danielle, if they want to talk with VisionPoint more about how adult learners can move from interest to enrollment, please email us info@visionpointmarketing.com. Or, like we talked about today, if you want to reach out on social media, you can find us at VisionPoint Marketing, DM us, and we can set up a meeting time with you then as well. Danielle, thank you again for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.